Hey everybody, Ace here. 80% of Americans are in some form of debt. That is a huge number. If you are walking down the street, 8 out of every 10 people you see would have debt. That is just crazy to think about. I'm gonna go over some ways that you can pay off your debt in 2021. But before I get into it, I wanna go over good debt versus bad debt. And yes, there are some things that are considered good debt. Good debt would be a mortgage. Owning a home is a good thing. When you own a home, you get to build credit. You get appreciation in the home, and you can use the home for leverage, like renting out a room and a bathroom to make additional money. So if you have mortgage debt along with some other debt, don't consider that mortgage debt as really being debt. Your mortgage doesn't need to be paid off ASAP like other debts do. It's good for building credit, you're gaining appreciation in the home, you're paying down your mortgage, therefore you're gaining equity in the home as well. It's a good thing to have. That is mainly what I consider good debt. If you ask some other people out there, they might consider having student loans as good debt or some other things, but personally, I just think a mortgage is really the only good debt you can have. Everything else can and should be paid off as soon as possible. So, now let's get into how can you pay off your debt in 2021. Now I'm going to go over 2 different strategies you can use to pay off your debt. And there's definitely other strategies out there. You just got to find what works for you and implement it. The 2 strategies I'm going to go over are the debt snowball method, courtesy of Dave Ramsey, and the high interest approach. The debt snowball method is where you pay your smallest amount of debt first, and then you roll those payments into your larger debts, rather than just paying the minimums or throwing random amounts of money at your different debts. Utilizing the debt snowball method really helps accelerate paying off your debt. Now, let me go over an example of how someone might pay off a sizable amount of debt utilizing the debt snowball method with an example person. So we have this person. We're gonna call him Sam. And Sam is a maintenance manager making $18 an hour. So Sam is making roughly $37,000 a year, not including any overtime or bonuses. Sam really loved to party in his 20s, so he's racked up $8,000 in credit card debt at 22% interest. Sam has $5,000 in medical debt at 10% interest. Sam also recently bought a new car, so he has $12,000 in a car loan at 5% interest. And last, he has $6,000 in student loans. He went to school for 1 year but ended up dropping out because he realized it just wasn't for him. And that student loan interest is at 6%. So his total amount of debt is $31,000. So how should Sam go about paying off all this debt? Well, there's really a couple different ways he can go about doing it, but it all really just depends on how he can work the system. First would be to utilize the debt snowball method. The debt snowball method would be focusing on paying off the smallest amount of debt first and then rolling that into the larger amounts. So Sam would start paying the $5K down first and the minimums on everything else. Then once that $5K is paid off, he would roll the payments that he was making into the $5,000 amount into the $6,000 amount, making minimum payments on everything else. This method just ignores the interest rate on all the amounts and it just focuses on knocking off the smallest amount first and snowballing that amount into the larger amounts. It's an effective way to do it. But there are some people that don't like it because you have the counter argument of,
well, you're just racking up interest on your other accounts.
which is true. So the next method would be to tackle it in the high interest method. So Sam would categorize all of his amounts from the highest interest to the lowest interest and start paying off the highest interest amount first. So since Sam has 22% interest on his credit card with $8,000 in debt, he would focus on paying that one off first, making minimum payments on all the other debt second. And then once that highest interest rate is paid off, he would move to the second highest interest rate, and so on and so forth. Now, as I said earlier, it all depends on how you can work the system. Because for instance, Sam might be able to take that $8,000 22% interest credit card that he has and potentially work with the credit card company to lower the interest rate, or even better, roll it into a new credit card that has 0% interest for a certain time frame as a sign-up bonus and be able to pay it off at 0% interest. So in this example, Sam could take that $8,000 22% interest credit card, roll it into a new credit card with 0% interest for 1 year, and he could just move that down the list and pay off some of his other debts first. Or the counter argument, pay it off first with the 0% interest, so it's all said and done with, and then you don't have to worry about all of that looming over your head. When paying off debt, I personally like to do the high interest amount first. Anything with an obscenely amount of high interest, I always tackle first, leaving the lower interest payments towards the end. So credit card debt would always be the first thing I would pay off and then move to something like a car loan at 4 or 5%. But if I don't have anything that is obscenely high interest and everything's ranging in that 4 to 7%, that is when I would utilize the debt snowball method. Pick the smallest amount first, knock that out of the way, and then just start rolling those payments into the next. There are a couple things I want to note when utilizing these strategies to pay off debt. First is you need to stick to your plan on paying off the debt. So when you set a plan, you need to stick to it through and through. And you can't be going out and adding any additional debt or any extra purchases when trying to pay it off. Second is paying off as much of the debt as you possibly can. So after you've paid your normal bills, your utilities, your rent, your food, everything else should be used to pay down the debt as fast as possible. And this also means really reducing your spending and trying to allocate any extra dollars that you have to pay down your debt. I know it's gonna suck for a while when you're trying to pay off your debt and it really feels like you're not getting ahead and you're just trying to grasp for anything that you can. It's really difficult being in debt. I totally understand that. But when you pick a strategy and you stick to it and you start seeing the results, it gets better, trust me. Lastly, you might be asking, should I wait to save for my retirement and utilize all the extra cash I have to pay down my debt? Well, it really depends who you are and what your situation is. Myself personally, if your company has a match for your 401k, whether that be 3% or 4%, I would at least put in that amount to get that match for your company, or else you're leaving that free money on the table. And then everything else that you have, I would, instead of putting it into retirement, I would definitely utilize to pay down your debt. So for example, if you were gonna put 10% into your retirement and your company has a 4% match, I would just put 4% in to get that 4% match, and then that other 6% that you were gonna put into your retirement, utilize to pay down your debt. You also have to weigh how much money you're gonna gain investing in your retirement versus how much debt you have and how much interest your debt is costing you. It's really just a balancing game and trying to figure out what works best for your situation. In the end, you just need to create a plan, stick to the plan, and stay positive. Being in debt sucks. It really sucks. It's depressing, it's sad, but I promise you, there is light at the end of the tunnel. If you liked this video or learned anything, please just tap that thumbs up button for me and subscribe below. Please subscribe below. Leave me a comment down below on what debt method you're gonna utilize, or if you have any questions on the 2 strategies that I listed, or if you wanna hear more about how I personally got out of my debt. And until then, I'll see you in the next video.